Hi, Ray here, and in this little video I'm going to take a look at the most recently released neutral density (ND) filters for GoPro cameras. In the spring I bought and reviewed the Freewell standard day 4-pack that came with a cage to attach the filters, and it came with 4 filters: polarizer, ND4, ND8, and ND16. And when I reviewed that little package, I did criticize that the ND16 just wasn't enough for a really bright sun. And in fact, I phoned Freewell, who said, oh yes, we're going to be adding a 32 and a 64. But their production was held up by the unfortunate events in China of COVID. I ended up gaffer taping the ND4 and the ND8 to get 5 stops of light reduction, and that worked out reasonably well, except for the fact that it was very hard to tape the filters together, and it really wasn't a long-term solution. So now Freewell have released these new filters, and I should add, for those people who are looking at or who have just bought the newly released GoPro Hero 9, that Freewell have also come out with the same filters, in fact a whole range of filters from ND4 to ND64 and even actually ND1000. And it looks to me like the new GoPro Hero 9 has been redesigned, so the lens sticks out, but it's not rounded. It is straight. It sticks out straight. So they've been able to just create filters that will fit onto there without the use of a cage. However, I really like the cage for added protection, and also it has a cold shoe mount on it. And I'm not really impressed with the little fold-down legs, whatever they call them. The attachment for accessories that are on the GoPro Hero 8 and now the GoPro Hero 9. So I'm really happy to have those heavy-duty metal aluminum attachment point for accessories on the Freewell cage. So it was actually in July that I ordered the new filters, and what I ordered was the ND32 and 64. I ordered those direct from China because I couldn't find a source for them anywhere else, Amazon or whatever. So by the time I got that package landed, paid all the duties and shipping and whatnot, those 2 filters that I bought, the ND32 and 64, cost me landed as much as the original standard day 4-pack cage filters. So just something to be aware of if you're shipping direct from China. And I should also mention that at the same time Freewell released the day pack, which is 6 filters in all, I think, and for the roll cage for the GoPro Hero 8. Well, that about wraps up this blathering, and I think we can go on to actually look at how all these filters work. So I'll do all the filters now from ND4 right through to the ND64. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit generally about neutral density filters and why you'd want to use them. Now, the following comments are assuming that if you're using a GoPro camera, that you're using, say, the cinematic preset, and that you've taken advantage of the ProTune feature to manually control those settings. A while back I made a video about setting up the cinematic preset on the GoPro Hero 8, and I'll link to it right here. So when it comes to video, and we'll talk about stills in a little while, you probably want to control your shutter speed so that it adheres to the 180-degree rule. What's the 180-degree rule? The 180-degree rule says that if you're using a frame rate of, say, 24 frames a second, which is what we're using right here, that you'd want to double that for your shutter speed, and so exactly 1/48th of a second. Not all cameras can do exactly 1/48th of a second, the GoPro can, but say 1/50th would be close enough. And So, why do you want to do all that? Why do you want to use the 180-degree rule? And in particular, why would you want to use 24 frames a second as your frame rate? Well, it's generally accepted that when it comes to frame rates, 24 frames a second will give you a more, say, cinematic or filmic look to your video. So for instance, if you had fast-moving objects like that, or your camera was moving, that you get a more natural-looking blur rather than the more clinical action camera look that you would get from higher frame rates. It's a given that we've set our ISO to its base ISO, in this case 100, so now the only place we have to go in terms of adhering to that 180-degree rule and keeping our shutter speed at 1/48th is to control the amount of light that actually enters the lens, hence ND filters. When it comes to stills, the effect we're usually looking for is that milky look with moving water or clouds, and we achieve that by extending our exposure time to multiple seconds, minutes, even hours. ND filters come in different strengths, if you will, and by different designations according to different measurements, and these are often used interchangeably, so it can be a little bit confusing. So you have your ND4, ND8, ND16, etc. And then by stops of light reduction, so -1, -2, -3, and finally by optical density, so that could be 0.6, 0.9, 1.2, and so on. But let's look at how different filters of different strengths affect this situation right here. So let's take a look at those relationships between filter factor, stops of reduction, and the optical density of the filters. An ND4 gives us 2 stops of light reduction and an optical density of 0.6, while an ND8 gives us 3 stops of light reduction and an optical density of 0.9. An ND16 gives us 4 stops of light reduction and a filter factor of 1.2. And our ND32 gives us 5 stops of light reduction and a filter factor of 1.5. And finally, for what I have, the ND64 gives us 6 stops of light reduction and the filter factor is 1.8. Now, Freewell have also released a ND1000, which is 10 stops of light reduction and filter factor of 3. I didn't purchase that one because, frankly, I would only use a 10-stop filter for, say, stills. And I have those for my stills camera. I don't usually use this as a stills camera. But for those of you who do use this as a stills camera, then maybe you'd be interested in the 10-stop for that effect of, blurring out clouds and smoothing water and all that kind of stuff for long exposure photography. The fog is finally burned off. It took all day, and so we've got some fairly bright sun, and I'm running an ND64. Now, in my original review of the Freewell Standard Day 4 pack, I lamented, as I've said, that it didn't come with anything above an ND16, and I said that if we got a 32 and a 64, then it would be a nice complete set, and that's the case now, and I'm very happy. What do you think of these filters? Do they look good to you? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so and hit that notification bell while you're at it. And before I go, I should probably mention that as far as the audio goes, right now I'm recording directly into the GoPro Hero 8, nothing between me and the GoPro 8, whereas all the other clips, including the other GoPro 8 clips and the stuff that I recorded on my Nikon Z6, the audio was all recorded externally. And I used a shotgun mic and also a stereo mic, both from Røde, the NTG2 and the Røde Stereo VideoMic Pro. But right now, as I said, this is directly going into the GoPro Hero 8. And there was a little bit of a breeze came up, And the GoPro Hero 8, as soon as you get any wind, forget it. You need to either record externally or somehow muffle the wind noise. The automatic wind noise on the GoPro Hero 8, yeah, it doesn't really work. So anyways, I guess what I've done now is I've shown you a little bit of the way that I record with the GoPro cameras, because as I've said before, my main reason for using a GoPro camera is really just to make those little clips where I need a lightweight camera or something that I can stick onto my car, or you know, the way that most people use action cameras. But I like to mix those in with the clips that I've shot on my more professional cameras like the Nikon Z6, and I like to maintain the same kind of look. So I use flat profile here just the same as I do on my other cameras, and they're just easier to deal with in post-production. So there again is my rationalization for trying to mix those two cameras together, and I hope it was of some use to you.